Hello, you're watching Implementing Plaid in Bubble.io. This is Unit 4 on balances. My name is Brian Alderman. I'm the owner and principal at Lost Sheep Advisory. We're a boutique no-code consulting firm specializing in financial and business operations solutions. I built the Plaid plugin that you're using. It's the most fully featured and best reviewed Plaid plugin for Bubble. I'm also the creator behind a number of other apps, including ivco.app and a couple other things. You can work with us by visiting lostsheep.dev. We offer free email support for the Plaid plugin that you're using. Just get in touch via info@lostsheep.dev. We also offer on-demand Bubble office hours, development projects to help you execute your vision, and fractional CTO efforts to contribute to your strategy and expert ownership of your technology. Let's dive in to balances with Plaid. In this unit, and by the end of this video, your app will be able to connect to your current user's will be able to use a current user's account balance and keep a record of balances historically for your connected accounts. Specifically, we're going to go through what different scenarios make sense and what these concepts of real-time versus cached balances are in Plaid. We will look at ways to save balances whenever they're retrieved from Plaid, and there's a number of different scenarios that happens in. And we'll know about obtaining an uncached real-time account balance. So let's first talk about cached versus real-time balances. These solve two different business problems. Cached balances are provided in almost every Plaid product. Investments, transactions, assets, liabilities, they all include balances of the accounts that you are involved in. That data, though, is typically updated only about once a day. For most of your use cases, this is going to be fine. We don't need absolute real-time account balances because there is a little lag. Think of when you go into your bank login page, you might see some pending transactions. Those may not have made it all the way through to Plaid yet, so the balance might be a little old without those pending transactions, for example. In some cases, though, that real-time account balance is going to be important. Let's say that you're trying to check if an account has sufficient balance before initiating an ACH transfer. While that's not always required, the payment process might handle this. It could be good to check for that depending on your use case. Also, lending use cases might need more real-time account balances. Plaid does offer a way to do this, but you have to explicitly ask for that real-time balance, and it has a fairly high cost per inquiry. Your deal with Plaid may differ. I find it usually is about $1.50 per inquiry, so that can add up pretty quickly. So for the most part, cached balances are going to be fine. We're going to look at both of these things today. So just keep in mind the difference here between cached balances and real-time balances. The other concept that we need to understand with balances before we dive into Bubble here is the idea of available versus current balance. There are two different kinds of balances, really three. We'll talk about the third in a second, that you see when you are getting data back from Plaid. First is this available balance. That's net of pending transactions, so it includes the balance after calculating for the pending transactions. It's not always available. Certain banks don't support this, and you should think of this as available to spend. It's not necessarily the account value. So for credit accounts, available balance is the total you can spend without hitting the credit limit, so it's the limit minus the current balance. For investment accounts, this is the total available cash, and they talk about this a little more at this link below. Current balance, on the other hand, doesn't include pending transactions, and it's the funds in or owned by the account. So for credit accounts, this is a positive number. It's the amount owed, or it's the amount owned, or that should say owed, amount owed, versus loan accounts. This would be the principal remaining on the loan to pay back. Investments, it's the total value. For a depository account like savings or checking, that's going to be the amount actually in the account. There's one other type that we're not really going to go too far into today that you'll see throughout Plaid. It's the limit amount. That isn't really available in the US typically, but other places, in particular Europe, this could be the prearranged overdraft limit for your account. So your mileage there with limits may vary. So let's go ahead and dive into Bubble. The first thing I want to point out, I'm going to go over to Bubble here. I have my demo page up here where we link a new account. The first thing to notice is the balance product is not a product itself. You don't need to initiate it. So when I link a new account, remember how I've talked about the different product types. This one's doing auth. I could change this to like a transactions, type product, etc., etc. Balances is not one of the options here. You also see this in the create link token step that we covered in the very first video. But balances is not an option. Balances just comes with all the products. It's there automatically. You don't have to specifically ask for it. So for the sake of this demo, I'm just using the transactions product. Balances is not required. So let's start with approach number one. The first thing we're going to do is figure out a way to handle account balances whenever we get them from Plaid, which is pretty much all the time. So I'm going to want some generic way to store balances in my account so that I can start building up a history of them. And to do this, I want to go look at the data model real quick. So in create link token, we'd set up this idea of there's institutions, there's accounts, there's transactions. Now we're going to set up this idea of account balances. And within the accounts, we're going to have a list of the balances that I can very quickly get a chronological history of the balances, and then a specific detail with the balance date and balance amount here. So that's what we're going to go ahead and build. So the first thing we're going to do here in my data tab is create that new data type, Plaid account balances. And I'm going to set up all the different pieces it needs. So these are always associated with an account. I'll pick my Plaid account there. These have a balance date. These have an available balance. And they have a current balance. So now I have a place to put Plaid account balances. The other thing I need, if we went back and looked here, remember I want to keep a list of balances in the account. That just makes it easy to look up what's needed there, or what balances are part of that account, basically. So I'm going to go update my Plaid account data type here. I'm going to say balances. I'm going to make this the new data type, Plaid account balances we just created, and it's going to be a list because accounts have multiple balances. So now I've got a list of Plaid balances going on in here. The next thing I need is a way to actually create these Plaid account balance records that we just set up. So I'm going to do this as a backend workflow because that will let me use this workflow all over my application and all the different places balances come in. And these are, well, we'll talk more about cache balances in a minute. So let me create a new workflow. I'm going to call it create balance. And I'm going to set up those same 4 parameters. Plaid account, balance date, available balance, and current balance. Then my action is going to create a new thing, and it's going to create one of those Plaid account balances we set up a minute ago, and it's going to fill out all 4 of those fields with the data we just set up in our API. Oops. Available balance, balance date, and current balance. Then the next thing it's going to do is, now that it's created a new account balance, I want to make changes to the associated account. I just want to add the balance I just created to that list of balances. So now my account will have a list of all the associated account balances. That's all this API is going to do. Then we need to initiate this API anywhere that we need to store balances from. There are a number of places where you get cache balances. So anytime you are getting a response from Plaid, that could include, for instance, in the transactions product, when I am starting with historical updates and I'm creating my different accounts, maybe I would want a balance there. Maybe I would want, whenever I create an account, I want to maybe schedule this API workflow, create balance. And maybe I want to go, if you look, I already passed into this API create account the available balance and the current balance. So maybe I want to schedule the workflow I just created, create balance, anytime I go and create a new account, and that'll add the account balances properly. Maybe I also want to do it whenever I do maybe historical updates or default updates. I'm going to go ahead and throw this into the default update option here. And actually, this is not a create balance call. This needs to be a schedule an API workflow on a list create balance call. Because what I'm doing here, let me back up. If you remember in the transactions product, whenever we get a default update, that means Plaid has more data about the account, more transactions data, which means the balance of my account has probably changed. So at this point, I would want to get new balances. I am here going through and creating all the new transactions in my database. I want to do something very similar for the balances. So this time, maybe I would go use the API. If I look in here, there's a balance, check account balance. That's getting a real-time balance. Maybe I would want a cached balance, so I'd do the exact same API call. I could just copy the thing from create transactions, put it in here, but instead of body transactions, I want body accounts. And I'm going to do a type of list to run transactions get body account transactions. So this is going to go through a list of all of the accounts that were triggered as part of this default update. And it's going to try to create a balance and get the current balance for each of these accounts. So I'm going to say this is, for this account is, I need to search for the Plaid account where the account ID equals this body account's account ID, because this is looking in my database for the correct account. I'm going to say that this balance date is right now because I'm going out and checking. I just got the webhook, so it's the most current balance that I have. And then I could say this is the available balance and this is the current balance. So again, this is going to use the get transactions call the exact same way I'd set it up here for create transactions, using the new transaction count. Go see the transactions video if you're curious to learn a little more, and it's just going to try to update my balances every time I get a webhook and store those into the database. Let's see some of this in action. So I have a sample page set up here. It's going to go through and link a new account. Whenever it links a new account, it's going to go through those workflows we just set up. So it'll create new accounts and it'll get the balances every time I go get those new accounts. Then I've just created a repeating group here that uses that Plaid account balances. And it goes and gets the balances of all of the accounts that are part of the bank that I just connected. And it displays the balance date, the current balance, and the available balance in this repeating group. Again, these are all cached balances. So these are things that I'm storing whenever some other product tells me there's an update. For instance, the transactions product, that's what's going on here. I'm going to initiate using the same Plaid link flow the transactions product. And we'll see this in action. So once that successfully creates, it's going through all the steps we set up in the Plaid link video. It's going to, here in a second, go through and create the accounts. See, it's creating the accounts, and here's some balances it's creating as it's creating the different accounts. There's a list of them. I could go look in my database too and see. I pick Plaid account balances here. It's creating different balances. Whenever it has available balance, whenever it has current balance, it's storing that in there. So I'm starting to get a history of balances as of the moment that I connected the accounts. You'll see these are balance date as of right now. Those are still cached balances. I showed you a minute ago how maybe I'd want, whenever I get a default update of transactions, to create new balances. I won't run through that right now, but it would work. This would add more balance records every time I get a transaction update. So that's balance histories. Let's say, though, that I am in more of a lending scenario or a money transfer scenario, and I want not the cached balance that I'm storing in my database, but a different approach. I want to get the balance right now. I don't so much care about the history or the details of each of the transaction balances. I just want to get the current balance. So this is the other approach. This is the one that's getting the real-time balance from Plaid that costs a little bit more. And I can do that using this get current balance call. So I'm going to go set that up right now. You'll see here I've got a button. There's the get current balance. And what I want this to do is just do a quick action here. I'm looking for Plaid balance, check account balance. I've got to go get the access token from my institution, and I need the account ID for the account that I'm looking for. So I'm just going to go ahead and use the checking account that's connected here. So I'm just going to copy this. I already did a search for the checking account here, just for the sake of this demo. You could put in whatever account ID that you need, and I need its account ID here. Except I need the first item's account ID, so there's only one value. It's to a text. So there will be the account ID. And then I can, in this case, I've got a state set up where Plaid balance is. Oops. Let's see where I did this. So I just wanted to show here the current balance and the available balance. So I'm going to set up a state here. See it in actions. Available, see it in actions current balance, that's just a state on this element. And see it in actions available balance, I set those up earlier. And you'll see in the workflow, I can just set the state for my see it in action card. Available balance is result of step 1's accounts. Available balance, oops. Make sure it's the account that I'm looking for. It will be, because I'm only requesting one account's balance. So body accounts, first items, available balance, and then I do the same thing here for the current balance. Change it to balance is current. So whenever I hit this button, just to summarize, it's going to go out and ask Plaid for the very current balance, not the cached balance, of this account ID. It's going and looking for just my checking account. And then I'm going to set a state on my page for the body account's first item, which I know is that checking account because I'm only asking for one account here. And it's going to set that available balance and the current balance. Let's see that in action. So I'm going to go through, link a new account. Let me pick a different institution there. As I link a new account, it's still going through that back-end workflow that we set up earlier. It's getting those historical balances. That can happen in parallel here. And then as it's getting those, I can also have it go get a current balance, and this is going to go out to Plaid and give me the most up-to-date balance, 110 and 100 for that checking account, using that real-time balance. Two other notes before we finish up. One note is I could, instead of doing this for just one account, there is a way to do it for multiple accounts. Let's say here I want this repeating group to, instead of pulling from my database, I want it to get data from an external API. There's a balance check account balances API here, external API here that just needs the access token. So if I change this to, where is it? Balance check account, balances account body. So on this list, balances check account, balances account body, because that's where the account balances are. And it's going to go, this is going to go out to Plaid for all of the accounts that are part of this institution. Grab its most current balances, and I can here instead say current sales account balances, account ID, current sales account balances, balance available, current sales account balances, balance current. So now if I run this and connect, I just changed this repeating group to, instead of looking in my database and relying on those cached balances that I've stored in my database, it's going to go out and ask Plaid, hey, what's my most current balance? You might need this again for money transfer or lending reasons. And I could indeed also use that get balances API call, that external API call I just showed you, to add that data to my database. So here it is, it's going out and getting the most current database, most current balance. But remember, this may cost you more money because it is getting that real-time balance instead of the cached balance. So that's item number one. To show as a different approach here, this is using the API to get the current balances instead of using the things that are in my database to get cached balances. Item number two I want to note as we get to the end here is the balances that you have available here are only available from the moment your user connects their account to your app and forward. So you can start storing balances, for instance, whenever you run an API to go check it, or whenever I, as we showed earlier, pull a default update from transactions and store that balance. If you need historical balance history, that is available in Plaid's Assets product, which we will cover in a future video, so keep an eye out for that. So, what have we gone over today? We talked about what a real-time balance versus a cached balance is. Again, in most cases, cached balance is going to be fine for your app. We created a way to save balances whenever they're retrieved from Plaid, so that's setting up that Create Balances API, which we then used. We saw a couple of examples of how to use it in the Create Account step and in the Default Update step for transactions. You could put that elsewhere. I could have put that on my page that we were editing to say, whenever a user opens this page and I reach out to Plaid to get transactions, save the balance data that comes with it using that same API, that Create Balances API. And we looked at how to obtain an uncached real-time account balance using that workflow and the balances, the Plaid balance product, as well as in that repeating group with the Plaid balances data source that get data from an external API. Hopefully this answers your questions about balances. If not, feel free to get in touch, info@lostsheep.dev, and I will do my best to answer any questions that you have. Thank you so much for watching.